I worked in high school at Firestone, and I would, as part of my job duties, have to blow out the brakes on cars with asbestos filled dust. It was just dust. Asbestos dust is all it was, and we were blowing it all over the place. And I had took pride in what I did, so I want to make sure I got every last bit. And I know I inhaled a lot of that, and I've had some breathing troubles later in my life. Y'all have heard me talk about that, and I always wondered. And I saw a lot of advertising on TV, and then I went with these people, asbestosclaims.law, because of our guest, Justinian Lane, who's about to join us, who's known as JC, because with him it's not business, it's personal. And let me begin by introducing Justinian C. Lane. How you doing, JC?
Hey, I'm doing great, Tommy. How are you today?
I'm okay. I told, the story about with the brake dust and so forth, and how this is personal to you. And let's start there. This affected you personally, and that's why you started doing this, 10 years now?
About 12 years, I guess.
12 years,
okay.
Yeah,
it's been a while, yeah.
Because you had family members, right?
I did, yeah. My grandfather he was in the Army and spent some time in World War II on some naval ships, and then he spent many years as a mechanic. And he died of an asbestos-related cancer when I was probably 21 years old, something like that. And no one in my family had any inkling that asbestos could have had anything to do with it, because he'd been a lifelong smoker, and we just kind of forgot about it. And a few years later, about 6 years later, my grandmother passed away of lung cancer, and she had also been a smoker, but she'd also washed his clothes a lot, and she herself worked in a factory that had ovens insulated with asbestos. And again, we had no idea asbestos could have been related. I didn't find that out until after I was in law school.
My father was a heavy smoker in the Navy at 16 years old, and I wonder if he had not been exposed to some of this, because he had a lot of breathing troubles in his life as well. I know it can get very complicated, but you know this like nobody else. Can you explain what asbestos actually is and why it is so dangerous to people, and even, like you're saying, family members that wash the clothing, etc.?
Sure. Asbestos is the name that we've given to a group of 6 minerals. And one of the things the minerals have in common is that they break down into very, very tiny fibers. They'll split apart into microscopic fibers. And when you breathe these fibers in, your body can't process them. Normally, your immune system will flush out anything you breathe in that you're not supposed to. But the white blood cells that are supposed to clear everything out actually get damaged by these asbestos fibers. And over time, that can lead to scarring that can turn into cancer. And no one would have any idea breathing this stuff in, because it takes a minimum of 10 years before you'll develop an illness after breathing asbestos in.
I've been tested, and I'm waiting on the results. It'll be interesting to see. But, JC, I can remember what this stuff tastes like, actually, after all of these years. And I'm glad I got tested. When I was working with Firestone, I don't think they tried to hurt me. I don't think they knew this was dangerous. When did the industry start using it, and where were people likely exposed besides people like myself and your dad and my dad, auto mechanics?
Sure. The industry itself, the big manufacturers, they knew as early as the mid-1930s how bad their products were, but they managed to cover that up for a few decades. So people were working around it and had no idea. And as I've kind of come to find out, the 20th century was pretty much built on asbestos. I mean, it was in everything. But up to the mid-50s, any insulated wire, like on a toaster, a hair dryer, whatever, that would have had asbestos. They would have had it inside TVs, inside radios. They used it for thousands of different uses, and people often had no idea it was there. So it was about as common in the 50s and 60s as plastic is today.
And when there is, they find asbestos and it has to be removed, there are a lot of precautions taken, and I just find that so strikingly different than me blowing the brake dust all over the place, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I've thought of you because I've seen a video that the EPA put out in the early 80s called "Don't Blow It." And it specifically shows guys using compressed air to blow out brake drums. I mean, I know you did that.
Yep.
My grandfather did that. When I was a teenager, I did that. I mean, that's how you cleaned them out. But no one bothered to tell regular people, hey, you don't want to breathe this stuff.
And, I was, making sure I was doing it. I wanted to get every bit out of there, leaning in and everything else. Let me take a quick break, JC. When we come back, we'll talk about the diseases that are directly known today to be the result of asbestos exposure and then how people can get compensation, all that. We're talking to Justinian C. Lane, an asbestos attorney. You've seen this all over the television, and you wonder, maybe it involves you, maybe it doesn't. Even if you have cancer, it could be asbestos that got you sick and not the smoking, although you shouldn't be smoking. 8:19, back in a flash, WWL. 822, Tommy Tucker, WWL, talking to JC, Justinian C. Lane, with asbestosclaims.law. He's an asbestos attorney. That's all he does, and he's been doing it for about 12 years. Somebody texted in, JC, about roofing. Lots of the old roofs were asbestos. We used to cut pieces to fit. It was a big thing after Katrina. Should something like that be tested?
Now, the typical amount of time that it takes before an illness would show up from asbestos would be a minimum of 10 to 15 years.
Oh.
So somebody who worked around it with Katrina, they might be coming up at the point where it might show up, but it still could be later. It's surprisingly enough, it's not uncommon for it to take up to 50 years for illnesses to show up.
It is insidious. So what are some of the diseases that we know today are directly related to asbestos exposure?
Sure. Mesothelioma is a type of cancer that's caused almost exclusively by mesothelioma or by exposure to asbestos. Then there's also lung cancer, which can be caused by lots of things, including asbestos. Throat cancer, colon cancer, stomach cancer, those have all been linked to asbestos exposure. And then there's some breathing diseases like asbestosis, which you could probably guess by the name is only caused by asbestos.
Would you necessarily know that you have this, or if you're suspecting, like I was with breathing trouble, I guess if you've been exposed to it, the best thing is to be tested? Yeah,
absolutely. There's a lot of folks who the symptoms you wouldn't be able to tell. With people age, you just don't, your lung capacity isn't what it was when you were 18, but you can't tell, is that because of asbestos or is that because of aging? And our testing can kind of find that out and figure out what your issues are.
I know a lot of people are hesitant. I said earlier, I don't blame Firestone for this. I don't think they knew. I don't think they would have purposely, this was pre the time you're talking about with the EPA and all that stuff for whomever put the video out. But the money that is available does not hurt the employer or the workers that work at the place or anything like that, right?
Not at all. The companies that manufactured the asbestos products, those are the ones that hid the dangers. They had insurance policies for selling defective products. And over time, Asbestos Trust got set up with about $30 billion worth of money. It's mostly insurance proceeds and other money that was set aside specifically for sick people. So no one's going to get fired or lose their job or have their stock value drop or anything like that when these claims get filed. The money's just set aside and is waiting for people who are sick.
To be tested is as easy as just, for the most part, starting with a chest X-ray?
That's right. Asbestos diseases are typically diagnosed first with a chest X-ray, and sometimes if something shows up, you might have to get a CAT scan, but typically it's just a chest X-ray.
And I'm awaiting the results. So I guess you just got into this because, JC, of your family, or how did you get involved with asbestos? Because when I dig into the layers of this, pardon the reference, but man, this is a very complicated field. What made
it
you?
Really is. Yeah. When I was in law school, my first year, you go get a job in the summer working for a law firm. And it just lucked out that the firm that I worked for did asbestos and some other stuff, and they let me spend some time in the asbestos area. And I just kept getting more and more and more interested in it because it's just such an interesting story, and it affected so many people.
Somebody texted in, if somebody has a parent who died from cancer, is there any way, and that's a shame, if somebody went through a hard time and didn't know it, I guess, is there any way post-mortem to determine this, or parent or exposure, or not?
If the deceased parent had left behind a chest X-ray, the evidence would be there on the chest X-ray. So from time to time, that exact situation happens, and we're able to pull out an X-ray, and we can see, yep, this was asbestos-related illnesses, and the trusts accommodate if somebody is deceased, and they understand you can't make them do some of the other testing. So we can often help.
Okay. My dad died recently. First had bladder cancer like 12 years ago, and a few years ago got pancreatic cancer and lung cancer. Has asbestos been known to, I guess, cause other types of cancers?
Some people in the medical arena are linking asbestos to other kinds of cancer. I've heard it linked to kidney cancer and even brain cancer, but all of science isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be another couple decades before they're able to make that link or not.
When it comes to exposure, what kind of jobs would people had to have had or been involved with, or maybe their loved ones, and then they came home and washed the clothes? What kind of industries are we talking about here?
I'd say pretty much anything that was a blue-collar job, anything from, mechanic to drywall to paint. In the 70s, lots of different kinds of paint had asbestos mixed in it. If it was a job that, if it was blue-collar and you worked in the 60s or 70s, you probably were exposed to asbestos.
And again, you shouldn't be smoking, but if somebody has been diagnosed with lung cancer or is a smoker or was smoking at the time, they shouldn't necessarily think that it was the smoking that caused the lung cancer, and the doctor may not have picked up on the fact that it was, in fact, asbestos related?
Right. See, doctors don't usually care how you got the cancer. They just care that you have cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And as science has kind of come out over the years, it's shown that if you're around asbestos, you're about 5 times more likely to get lung cancer than somebody who isn't. If you're a smoker, you're about 10 times more likely. But if you were a smoker who was around asbestos, you're 50 times to 90 times, kind of the range, more likely to have gotten lung cancer. So if somebody was a smoker and they got lung cancer working around asbestos, it's a pretty good chance asbestos contributed to that in a big way.
And it's not a cumbersome thing. If somebody goes to asbestosclaims.law, as did I, it's been very easy for me. You're not talking about a lot of preparation or documents or anything like that. It's pretty turnkey, is it not?
The only thing we really ask people to tell us is where they worked that put them around asbestos. We take care of the rest. So if you can remember where you worked, that's all we need.
Any final thoughts, JC?
Other than I just want people to understand that asbestos is still out there. It's still killing people, and it's going to be with us for a long time. So please take precautions if you're doing anything with home remodeling or auto repair with an older vehicle or building.
Thank you, JC. I appreciate your time and your efforts. I really do. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thanks, Tommy.
Justinian C. Lane, asbestos attorney. It's asbestosclaims.law.